Hello and welcome back to Read Becca for my weekly chatty catch-up on everything I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, which has not been that much this week. So I normally try to save my Lavie chats and random updates for the end, but that's kind of the context for everything this week, so I guess we'll do that up front, so that I will put timestamps down below if people want to skip it though. It's been a very hectic week. I have had a lot going on work-wise, which is not out of the ordinary, but everything else is just going wild. My home renovation is well and truly started, and that has been extremely hectic. My kitchen is somewhat demolished right now. I don't have any plumbing in there, and just everything is chaos, it feels like. The cats are trapped in the basement, so they can't endanger themselves or escape as there are people coming and going constantly. It has been a lot. Most everything going on is good and positive, but it's a lot of stress, a lot of time and mental energy, and as a result, I did not touch a book for 4 days this week. Not of any type. No audio, no print, nothing. Not because I didn't want to, but the time was not there, the mental energy was not there. And that's the longest I've gone, I think, in many years without reading. Probably at least 5 years. And so it's been an unusual week for me. That said, I'm still feeling a lot of enthusiasm for books and for the things that I have on the horizon, I guess, for reading. But it's just been very, very hard to read. I didn't film, I didn't edit anything at all this week. I'm hoping this video usually requires pretty minimal editing other than putting in covers and stuff. But I'm going to try to keep it to the most minimal editing that I possibly can, because, as I said, I just do not have the energy or mental space for this sort of thing. So that's what's going on in my life. The cats are dealing as well as they possibly can. Thankfully, I mentioned last week we had gotten my cat on some meds for him to be much less stressed, and I think those are really doing the job because we haven't had any major fights or anything in the basement. They're not happy about being trapped though. So my life is chaos right now, and unfortunately it seems that will continue on for a little while, but as I said, mostly good. So let's dive into the books. Now, I only have a couple that I finished. As I said last week, I very much was predicting I was going to finish The Master and Margarita, or force myself to finish the last 30 pages, and I did last weekend. This was great. I could not tell you what it was about though. And oh, I should mention, I still have my plane ticket in here. This was a book that I had started, and I read that much, about 150 pages, I think, in 2015. And at that point, I was reading and not feeling well on a flight, and I stopped in the middle and just never got back to it because it was such a brain fog type situation that I was struggling through. So getting back to it, I enjoyed it very much, but it was a bit of a slog to get through because I kept having interruptions. So I have been reading this since January and just slowly hitting stopping points. So that did not assist with keeping the thread of main plot. I think this book begins with the aspect that we have two men meeting at a cafe. One of them is an editor of a literary magazine, and the other man is a poet he has commissioned to write this radical poem denouncing the existence of Jesus Christ. And so this is supposed to be a very upsetting and disruptive work of art, basically. So up walks this mysterious man to the cafe and interjects himself into their conversation. He's very jovial and amenable, it seems. And this guy just kind of presents, well, obviously Christ was real. And the second chapter is a jump back to what we have to presume is him telling the story of himself being there, witnessing Pontius Pilate, and Christ at the judgment and sentencing, and the conversation that Pilate and Christ had on that day. And from there, after that point, the book becomes a fever dream, a very surreal story that is hard to grab onto what the main plot is. We mainly are following the mysterious man and his talking cat, Behemoth, as he's somewhat of a trickster character, as he is sort of bouncing around between people who are connected to these first two men, causing mischief. And that's mostly it, but it is truly surreal. So it is kind of hard to follow when things like naked people flying on someone they know who's been transformed into a pig, those sort of things happen. And I'm not sure on the meaning or symbolism of that entirely, but I'm sure it is there. Even with a lot of commentary included in this by Diana Burgin and Katherine Tiernan O'Connor, who also translated it, I don't know that I fully grasped that main plot. What I did very much grasp is the background plot, or the subtext, the messaging that is coming through here. That was very overt and easy to pull things out. So I think that very much I got an anti-fascist message throughout this. We see how easily, or we see very much, characters are being killed off, being disappeared, being sent away to asylums, or just simply away, far off. So they're out of the picture. How easy it is to make others who are friends turn on their personal families, friends, neighbors, and inform on them. How much people are willing to ignore things that are unbelievable or accept things that are unbelievable if it is in their favor to do so. How easily propagandized people are. There are so many things throughout this that people believe what they're given or what they're led toward rather than trusting their own gut, more or less. There's also this aspect that I picked up on of artist spaces constantly being targeted. So things like salons where creative minds were coming together, and just generally people who were about challenging themselves and creative thinking and really bouncing ideas together were so central to what was being suppressed in this novel or in the background of the novel. And again, I'm not sure if I'm taking away the right things from this, but I definitely found a lot in it to take away. And so I think it was very valuable from that aspect. So even though I didn't really know what the book was about, I think I got a lot out of it. I also did really enjoy the reading experience here. It's very readable. It is funny and witty, and the writing, I was a little concerned because this is written in Russian and translated, but it felt very accessible to me in terms of the readability. I would get caught up in reading it every time I would pick it up, but I kept getting distracted in my reading by other things. So that was very unfortunate. However, I thought this was a fantastic book. I'm so glad I did finally get back to it after nearly 10 years and read it, and I enjoyed it. I could see myself going back to reread this again because I feel like there is more insight there to be drawn out of this. I think the thing I liked the most of this whole book, though, was the sort of historical element. So I mentioned the Pontius Pilate story at the beginning. That does continue through. We get a handful of chapters that are this jump back to the continued story of Pilate, of going to Calvary and Christ's death there, of the fallout after. And I think that historical story that was very linear and easy to follow was great, and I enjoyed that the most. I don't actually know where it tied into the rest of the book, though. So I don't know, but I really liked that part the most. So overall, wonderful reading experience. I had taken the push to pick this back up because Scott from Gunpowder Fiction Plot really likes this novel, and so I wanted to get to it. It does not seem like his usual sort of thing, the absurdity and surrealism, certainly, but the satire is definitely to what I would expect of his taste. So that made sense, I think. But I heartily agree with his enjoyment of this because it was a fantastic book, and as I said, I could totally see pulling information out of this, new takes every time you pick it up because it is such a layered book. So I'm very glad to have gotten to it. Then as a result of my broken brain, I turned to Abhorsen, and I was actually pretty far along in this last time around, I think. I had a Garth Nix on my TBR for the month of March and couldn't get the audio for it, and I have been unable to read in print or audio on their own and have been needing to read hybrid, both print and audio together, to get anything to stick right now. So I was browsing my shelves for a sure thing, and this was it. I was like, oh, I have another Garth Nix, we'll just go to that one. And man, this was so good. There's very little I can say about it because it is sort of the third in a trilogy, an Old Kingdom series. It definitely, like, even to name characters in this would be really hard without spoiling things because of threats people have been under and things like that before this. But I would more say this is part of a duology where book 1, Sabriel, takes place many years before books 2 and 3. Sabriel sets up what this world is. It's a very divided world, very, very literally divided. There's a big wall running through it. And the southern area is pretty normal and feels like a not quite modern world. There's buses and trains and cars and that sort of thing, radios. They have technology, certainly. And a lot of them do not know really or have any consciousness of what's going on above the wall. North of the wall is a magical world where technology kind of breaks down if it goes there. Standard trope for magical lands. And in the magical Old Kingdom, there's a lot going on, primarily with things like necromancy and blood magic. So, or at least moments of blood magic through this. And the Abhorsen, both of this book and Abhorsen is a job that we get introduced to in the first book, which is a sort of necromancer who uses magical bells as their magic power to help the dead. So it's sort of a positive form of necromancy. There are also evil necromancers in this world though too. So there is a lot of heavy themes about grief and loss throughout this because it is so steeped in death. And I think this manages to find such great levity alongside that. So it has a wonderful balance where it's not just heavy or difficult to deal with throughout. So Sabriel gave us that world building and showed us the magic system, though it's not quite a hard magic system, it is pretty well defined. It gave us a lot of the connections that we needed to know about in order for Lyriel book 2 and Abhorsen book 3 to play out. So years have passed since Sabriel, and we're introduced to this character Lyriel in book 2. And that's really where the big epic story begins. Lyriel is in a convent for these nuns who are seers. They see the future. And she's supposed to get powers, and her time has really passed. And so she is an outcast within this nun's place and hasn't gotten her powers, and she has decided to give up on things at the beginning of Lyriel. And then her journey begins, and it is an epic quest. It is a big bad. It's a lot of standard elements in fantasy, but done in a way that you don't really see usually. And this is also written for young adults or teens, and it doesn't talk down to them about that. It doesn't oversimplify, yet it is really propulsively readable, and it's got so much more nuance, I think, than you expect from a YA novel. So last week when I mentioned I had just realized I was drawing a lot of connections to Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. And I see a ton of similarity in this with that, just in how Nix expresses the characters and deals with these heavier themes with such maturity, even though he is gearing this toward a younger reader. The presence of mind in how he's presenting that has the same richness, I think, that Bujold has in her books. And so I felt like this is a favorite series of all time, probably. I've loved the previous books very much, and they were ones I already loved. Sabriel has probably been on my radar as this is probably a top book, but this really ratcheted up. The constant growth, the empathy of the characters throughout, the way that Nix writes talking animals, they're not quite animals, they're magical beings, but they're talking animals for the purposes of anything. We have Mogget has always been a favorite character, and Mogget is this sort of magical cat being. One of my favorite literary cats, certainly, if not the favorite. It's right up there with Lion Cat. And Disreputable Dog over this series is so wonderful, and so many revelations about who they are. Yeah, there's so many great reveals throughout this. There just is so much to love in a book like this, and it really swept me away when I very much needed it. Nix is such a craftsman with books, and it blows me away just how much he has written. So many books. And the level of quality maintained through the ones I've read has been very high. So I really need to get to 2 more of that backlist, including the other book that was on my TBR for this month. Very, very much. So I am super thrilled to have finally read this. And now there's more in this series that continues on, not directly from this book, I think. So 2 and 3 are a direct continuing story. But I think after that we get different adventures, we get some prequels, some short stories, and none of them are on audio from my library. So, so sadly, I was actually for once ready to just go continue on, and I can't because I don't have print books and I don't have access to audiobooks for them. So, well. So speaking of my continuation, Frogkisser is the one I was supposed to be getting to. I also was supposed to be getting to last month the Bar Harbor Retirement Home for Famous Writers and Their Muses. That was on my TBR as well. So I started both of these. I have tried a couple times to see if I could get myself back to reading print and failed. So that on top of the not reading for 4 days meant I have not read anything else. So I did go through and select a bunch of audiobooks for books that I have on hand. And I think the one that I'm going to go for next is actually Bellwether by Connie Willis. I know basically nothing about this other than that it's Connie Willis and also that there was an audiobook available from my library immediately for it. So I have some other options, but I think this one sounds very good. It looks like it is a sci-fi near future, and one of the blurbs says it is social satire. That sounds fantastic, and Willis is fairly reliable, so I'm hopeful for this one. If my brain doesn't go along with it, I will be switching it up very quickly. Like I said, I have a bunch of other options. So minimal reading this week. I'm hopeful that next week will be different. It will still be very chaotic for me though. I did watch some stuff, but even my evenings have been very, very short. I've had limited time right before bed pretty much to watch or read, which I did not use for reading. And I pretty much watched old episodes of Cutthroat Kitchen. I have continued on with my DC movies, superhero movies watching on Netflix, and I finished up Wonder Woman 1984, which was not fantastic. It was okay. And the other one was The Suicide Squad, which was actually a very well crafted movie. I enjoyed it a lot. It's too much though. Like it's so over the top and just a constant barrage of things and people and violence, like very, very graphic stuff. So it was just being inundated constantly. There was no down moments. But it was a really well-made movie, so I enjoyed that one a little bit more. But I think we are past now the 3 that were the best, but we will see once I've finished up. I think I have 4 remaining to get done in the next week. I don't know if I can do it, but we'll see. That is, I think, my week this week. I also have a recommendation to leave you with, but from both myself and from Gumbo. So Gumbo, as a result of, she's a semi-feral cat. She's very easily stressed out. Being trapped in the basement is very stressful. Loud noises in the house all the time and people coming and going is very stressful, even though she is in the basement away from them. So she's been spending most of the time hiding out in the closet in the basement. That is her safe spot. Other than coming out occasionally to scarf down some food, use the bathroom, and then go back to her hidey hole. However, I was down there with the cats, hanging out and watching a little booktube on the TV, and she came peeking out and was fully watching, enamored with Book Chat with Pat, as we were being taken on a journey for Poetry Thursday about the Irish poet Pádraig Ó Tuama.
This book came from his work in reconciliation in Northern Ireland. Sorry for your troubles is a popular phrase all over Ireland. In the Irish language, the word for troubles, and that's the word confidential in Irish, it looks like this. Now, the structures that constrict you may not be permanently constricted. And you will probably be okay. And you must accept change before you die, and you will die anyway.
Now, Pat has mentioned in the past, I think, being a former teacher, and that really comes through in Pat's video, certainly. Very insightful and informative every single time, I think. And clearly Gumbo got that sense of just calming, I think, that Pat gives off. So I think that on its own is a strong recommendation for Pat's channel. But Pat is also a new booktuber and someone who I have subscribed to and enjoyed every single video from so far. So I heartily recommend checking out not just this particular video about an Irish author who I had never heard of before and came away very informed about, but also if you don't know about Pat's channel, you should definitely go subscribe, because certainly a great up-and-coming booktube channel. So that is it from me today, and I'm hoping for a possibly less chaotic week next week. Thank you so very much for watching.